For nearly 8 centuries, the lands of Al-Andalus had been a tapestry of cultures. Muslims, Christians, and Jews living under the shadows of palaces, universities, and mosques. Granada, the last Muslim stronghold, glittered like a jewel. Its red palace, the Alhambra, rose above the valley, its walls covered with verses, "There is no conqueror but God." But in the winter of 1491, the jewel was cracking. Aisha Alhora, Queen Mother of Granada, paced the battlements of the Alhambra, her flowing black robes billowing around her like smoke. Her eyes, sharp and gray as a winter sky, scanned the distant hills. She wasn't looking at the landscape. She was seeing through it, peering into the hearts of her enemies. Her grip tightened on the stone balustrade. Her mind raced, calculating risks, assessing losses, strategizing for a kingdom that seemed on the brink of collapse. The weight of Granada rested heavily on her shoulders, threatening to crush her. Her son, Sultan Boabdil, stood before her, a young man carved from marble rather than flesh, handsome and cold. "Mother," he began, his voice echoing the tinkling of fountains, beautiful but distant. "Our counselors say we must negotiate. Our people are starving. Are you afraid, son?" she asked, her gaze boring into his. The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusations. Her tone was a knife, honed to perfection over a lifetime of use. "I'm afraid for Granada, for our people," he replied, his voice barely a whisper against the roar of the Darro River rushing below. She turned back to the horizon, her shoulders stooped under the burden of their lineage, the blood of kings staining their fate. "Kings are remembered not for how they live," she said, her voice rough with unshed tears, "but for how they fall. Their story, like many others in the rich tapestry of history, is one of loss, of empires fading and kingdoms crumbling. But it's also a story of resilience, of courage, and of one woman who, despite her fears, stood as a bulwark against the tide, sacrificing everything for her people." Aisha Alhora was not born into royalty. There was born into fire, forged in the crucible of ambition and circumstance. Her father was a renowned warrior, and her mother a royal captive, bearing the scars of a past that refused to be forgotten. This unlikely union produced a daughter who was as fierce as she was beautiful, a combination that proved to be a potent force. When the rulers of Granada fell in battle, it was Aisha who stepped in, seizing the reins of power when her husband ascended to the throne. She didn't rule as a figurehead. No, she was a force, directing the affairs of the kingdom with the same intensity she brought to the battlefield. Her influence over her husband was absolute, shaping decisions, making sacrifices, and fighting alongside him. But it was in this crucible of conflict that Aisha's legend was truly born. She led her troops with the bravery of a lioness, protecting her people and her land from those who sought to destroy it. Her strategies were audacious, her tactics flawless, and her resolve unshakable. And yet, beneath the armor of a warrior, a mother's heart beat, torn between duty and the desire to shield her children from the horrors of war. As Granada faced its final battle, the stakes were higher than ever. It was a fight not just for land or power, but for identity, faith, and survival. Yet even in the darkest hours, Aisha's spirit remained unbroken, her presence a beacon for her people, a testament to the strength that comes from facing one's fears. As the winter of 1491 deepened its icy grip on Granada, the situation grew increasingly dire. Hunger gnawed at the people's bones. Fear stalked them in their homes, and despair painted grim portraits on their faces. Within the city's embrace, the factions grew bolder, their whispers turning into shouts. The nobles yearning for peace, the warriors demanding one last glorious stand, and the spies weaving their tales of woe and discord. The very soul of Granada seemed to be unraveling, thread by thread. In the shadowed corners of the Alhambra, where orange blossoms struggled to cling to the fading light, whispers of surrender and sacrifice echoed. Each day the voices grew louder, carrying with them the scent of fear and resignation. Yet amidst this darkness there was a glimmer of humanity. Within the palace walls, a young couple dared to dream. Their love story was not written in history books, nor sung by bards. No, it was etched in stolen moments, shared glances, and whispered promises. Their tryst was a rebellion against the despair that threatened to engulf them. For a few precious hours, Yusuf and Leela forgot the siege, the hunger, and the looming threat of war. They met in the shadow of the general leaf, where fountains once sang songs of joy. Now only the mournful breeze answered their whispered vows. He was a soldier, scarred by battles, haunted by memories. She was a vision of hope in a darkening world, her spirit resilient, her eyes reflecting the fading light of their dying kingdom. One night, as the moon painted silver streaks on the palace walls, Yusef held Layla close. The sound of drums and chants echoing from the battlements mingled with the rustle of the orange groves. "When Granada falls," he whispered, his voice rough with unshed tears, "I will not live under their laws. I will fall with my sword in hand." Layla, her fingers intertwined with his, tilted his chin up to meet her gaze. Her eyes, pools of liquid courage, reflected the flickering light of a nearby lamp. "Then I will fall into the memory of you," she whispered back. Their love story wasn't one of passion or luxury. It was a love born of loss, nurtured by fear and anchored by loyalty. In their love, they found solace, a haven from the storm that raged around them. Amidst the chaos, the courtiers whispered of betrayal, of visions of victory, of doubts cast upon their young sultan. Their words were like serpents, slithering into the cracks of Boabdil's resolve, poisoning his certainty. Doubt, like a stubborn weed, took root in his heart, choking the flowers of courage. He loved the poetry of the Andalusian nights, the dance of falcons in the sunlit sky, the tranquility of his gardens. But most of all, he cherished his people's stories, their hopes and dreams woven into tapestries of laughter and song. How could he bear the weight of their expectations? How could he become the warrior they needed when the poet within him yearned for peace? His family, his own blood, his own flesh and bone, seemed determined to make his path even more treacherous. His uncle, driven by ambition, had once attempted to seize power. His father, a shadow of his former self, mocked him for his interests, branding them as frivolous. And the people, God bless them, called him El Rey Chico, the Little King, a mocking moniker that echoed in the halls of his memory. Each scar, each whisper, each label was a nail hammered into the coffin of his confidence. He felt trapped, caught between the world he knew and the world he was expected to lead. Yet somewhere deep within him, a spark flickered, refusing to be extinguished. It was the ember of his spirit, waiting for a gust of wind to fan it into flame. Outside the city, the drums of war pounded their relentless rhythm, a chilling prelude to the inevitable. And as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, Granada braced for the final act. The battle for its soul was not just being fought on the streets and in the palaces, it was raging within the heart of a young king. Granada burned, not with the warm glow of a hearth, but with the cold flames of famine. The siege had lasted longer than anyone anticipated, stretching their resources thin and hope even thinner. As the weeks dragged on, the familiar bustle of the marketplace gave way to a haunting silence. The vibrant colors of trade and commerce faded into the somber hues of desperation. What had once been bustling thoroughfares became desolate paths, patrolled by gaunt figures with hollow eyes. Each step they took echoed the rattling of bones, a macabre dance of survival. The fragrant kitchens that once fed Granada's populace now stood vacant, their chimneys spewing forth not smoke, but the specters of meals past. On the cobblestone streets, mothers clutched their children close, shielding them from the sight of empty stalls and the even emptier hearts of their fellow citizens. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows of despair, the people gathered in small groups. Their hushed voices wove tales of hardship and loss, each story adding another layer to the shroud of their suffering. As the winter chill seeped into their bones, the whispers grew louder. Surrender or starve, negotiate or perish. Death stalked their dreams, its icy fingers tightening around their fates. The vibrant spirit of Granada, once renowned throughout the known world, was now reduced to a chorus of fear and surrender. 8. Within the palace walls, a sense of urgency permeated every room. Every council meeting carried the weight of impending doom. Every conversation, the sting of imminent loss. Even the servants hurried through the halls, their footsteps echoing the ticking clock of their city's demise. Granada's end drew near, and with it, the end of a way of life, a culture, and a kingdom that had stood the test of time. The winter of 1492 was a hard one. The wind that howled through Granada carried tales of misery biting deep enough to freeze the soul. By December, the city was on its knees, surrendering to the cruel grip of famine. The rumble of hunger echoed in the streets, drowning out the whispers of hope. Families huddled together in their homes, seeking warmth in numbers, sharing the last crumb of bread with tearful eyes. Children with bellies swollen with hunger stared blankly ahead, their innocence lost to the harsh realities of war and scarcity. Water, once a source of life, was now traded like gold, each drop a precious commodity bought and sold. The thirst for survival consumed Granada, turning neighbor against neighbor, friend against friend. As the days turned colder and darker, so did the hearts of men. The siege had woven a tapestry of desperation, trapping the people of Granada in its suffocating embrace. In the fading light of their dying kingdom, the whispers reached a fever pitch: surrender or starve, negotiate or die. The choice was clear, though the consequences were dire. The proud people of Granada, once defiant in the face of adversity, were now on the brink of giving up. For generations, they had resisted, holding fast to their heritage and way of life. But the relentless siege had chipped away at their resolve, leaving them battered and broken yet still breathing. As the shadow of defeat loomed over them, the question was, what kind of defeat were they willing to accept? On January 2nd, 1492, as the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, the young Sultan Boabdil, clad in the somber black of mourning, rode out of the gates of Granada. With him were his family and a handful of retainers, their faces etched with the pain of surrender. Outside the city walls, waiting for them, were the Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella. Their banners fluttered proudly in the morning breeze, symbols of the rising sun and the setting of an era. The scene was one of stark contrast, the vanquished and the victors, the fading light and the dawning age. As Boabdil approached, the air grew thick with anticipation. Exchange of the keys of Granada was more than a symbolic gesture. It was a transfer of power, a passing of the torch from one era to another. When the keys were handed over, Boabdil, his voice barely a whisper against the roar of the crowd, said, "God alone is great." His words, laden with the weight of ages, seemed to hang in the air, a last defiant echo of a disappearing way of life. In that moment, as the monarchs took possession of their newly conquered realm, the people of Granada knew that their world was irrevocably altered. The Christian era had begun, and with it came promises that would soon turn to dust. Granada may have fallen, but the legacy of Al-Andalus lived on. Its libraries, philosophy, architecture, and music traveled across Europe, inspiring the Renaissance. The Alhambra still stands today, whispering to every visitor, empires rise and fall, but beauty remains.